There are moments in life when the ground beneath us seems to tremble, when the road we have walked so confidently begins to feel uncertain. We may try to move forward, but the familiar paths are blocked. We may attempt to stay in comfort, but a restlessness within us will not allow it. And in these moments, we wonder, has something gone wrong? Have we made a mistake? But what if the disruption is not a mistake at all? What if the uncertainty is not a sign of failure, but a whisper from God telling us that the journey must change? There are few things more unsettling than encountering a door that will no longer open, especially one that once swung wide with ease. We assume that because we walked through it before, we will always be able to do so. We convince ourselves that familiarity is the same as permanence, that what has always been will always be. But then one day, the handle does not turn, the door will not budge, and no matter how hard we knock, how forcefully we push, or how desperately we plead, it remains shut. In that moment, frustration rises. Questions flood our minds. Was this not the way forward? Had we not been walking in the right direction? We strain to recall what we might have done wrong, what mistake might have caused the opportunity to vanish. But sometimes the closing of a door is not about punishment or error. Sometimes it is an act of grace. It is the nature of the human heart to cling to what is known. We convince ourselves that the road we are on is the only road. Even when the signs point elsewhere, we resist. And so, when God desires to move us to something greater, he often must first remove what we are unwilling to release. A door closing is not always rejection, it is redirection. It is an unseen hand guiding us, even when we do not understand. There are many who find themselves standing before a closed door today, bewildered by the sudden change. The career that once thrived is no longer fulfilling. The relationship that seemed so certain has drifted away. The place that once felt like home now feels foreign. It is tempting to see this as failure, to believe that if we try just a little harder, we can pry the door open again. But we must ask ourselves, what if it is not meant to open? What if the effort to return to what was is keeping us from what could be? If we are honest, we will admit that we have all prayed for things that, had we received them, would have led us down paths of destruction. We have all longed for doors to remain open that would have only trapped us in places we had outgrown. There are times when what once fit us no longer does. Growth demands change, and change often comes through what is taken away. Yet the closed door does not mean that we have been abandoned. It does not mean we are lost or left to wander without purpose. Quite the opposite. It is the first sign that we are being led to something greater. The difficulty is that we do not always see this in the moment. We knock louder. We beg God to reopen what he has already closed. We become so fixated on what is no longer available that we fail to notice the new doors appearing before us. There is a trust required when the path shifts unexpectedly. It is the trust that tells us that just because we do not understand does not mean there is no purpose. Just because we do not see the full picture does not mean there is no plan. The same God who led us through open doors in the past is the one who now stands before us, whispering that it is time to move on. A closed door is not an end, it is an invitation. It is the beginning of something new, something greater than what we are leaving behind. It requires the courage to step away from what is familiar and walk into what is unknown. It demands faith, not in the door itself, but in the one who is guiding us beyond it. So, when the doors before you refuse to open, when the opportunities that once came so easily seem out of reach, do not despair. Do not force your way where you are no longer meant to go. Instead, lift your eyes. See that the one who has closed this door has already prepared another. You may not know where it leads, but you can be certain of this. It leads exactly where you were always meant to be. There are moments in life when everything seems to be in place, yet something deep within us stirs. A quiet unease. A whisper in the soul that refuses to be ignored. At first we dismiss it, believing it to be mere fatigue or a passing mood. We go about our daily routines trying to silence the nagging voice with busyness and distractions. But no matter how much we try, the restlessness lingers. It grows stronger, more insistent, as if pulling us towards something beyond our current understanding. This feeling is not random. It is not something to be feared. It is, in many cases, a sign that God is shifting our path. We are creatures of comfort. We seek stability, familiarity, and the assurance that tomorrow will look much like today. We make plans, build routines, and settle into patterns that feel safe. But God does not call us to a life of mere comfort. He calls us to a life of purpose. And when we have outgrown our current season, when we are meant to move but hesitate, He places within us a divine restlessness, a holy discontentment, not to frustrate us, but to awaken us. This restlessness often appears in the most unexpected ways. A job that once brought satisfaction suddenly feels empty. A place we once loved no longer feels like home. A dream we once pursued with passion begins to lose its meaning. The people around us may not notice the shift, but inside we know something is changing. It is not that the work is meaningless or the relationships unimportant, but something inside tells us that there is more. This is the gentle stirring of God, reminding us that we were never meant to remain in one place forever. At times, this restlessness feels inconvenient. We ask ourselves, why now? Why, when everything seems stable, do I feel the need for change? We pray for clarity, for a sign, for something tangible to explain the longing in our spirit. But God does not always answer with clear instructions. Instead, He places within us a growing discomfort, not to discourage us, but to prepare us. He knows that if we become too comfortable where we are, we may never step into what He has prepared for us next. It is easy to resist this feeling. We tell ourselves that we should be content, that we should be grateful for what we have. And while gratitude is essential, contentment should not be mistaken for complacency. There is a difference between being thankful for where we are and refusing to move forward when God is calling us onward. A restless heart does not mean we are ungrateful. It means we are being prepared for something greater. The challenge is that this restlessness often comes without explanation. There may be no crisis, no external reason for the change we sense. Others may not understand why we feel unsettled. They may tell us to ignore it, to stay where we are, to be rational. But faith is not always rational. Faith moves beyond what is seen into what is unseen. When God is shifting our path, He does not always provide the full picture. Instead, He asks us to trust the stirring in our soul, to lean into the discomfort, and to follow where He leads. This does not mean the transition will be easy. Stepping into the unknown requires courage. It requires surrendering our plans, our timelines, and our expectations. It means letting go of the security we have built and stepping forward in faith. But God does not call us to change without purpose. If He is stirring our hearts, if He is making us restless, it is because He is preparing something new. So, when you feel this unshakable restlessness within, do not fear it. Do not suppress it or dismiss it as mere discontentment. Instead, bring it before God. Ask Him what He is revealing. Pay attention to the desires He is awakening in your heart, to the dreams that refuse to fade, to the longing that will not let go. For in that restlessness, there is a message. In that stirring, there is direction. And in that discomfort, there is the first step toward something far greater than you could have imagined. There are moments in life when we find ourselves standing at a crossroads, uncertain of the path ahead. We may have plans carefully laid out and pursued with diligence, yet something unexpected interrupts our course. At first, we may resist, questioning why things are not unfolding as we had envisioned. But then, seemingly out of nowhere, doors begin to open. Doors we never knocked on, opportunities we never sought. This is not coincidence. It is not mere luck. It is the quiet yet unmistakable hand of God shifting our path in ways beyond our understanding. Opportunities that appear unexpectedly often carry a deeper message. They remind us that no matter how much we plan, God is the one who orders our steps. We may have thought our lives were heading in one direction, only to be offered something we never imagined possible. Perhaps it is a job that comes when we were not looking, a relationship that arrives at an unforeseen time, or an idea that sparks a passion we never knew we had. In these moments, we must pause and recognize that divine intervention is at work. It is natural to feel hesitant when faced with an unexpected opportunity. We may doubt our ability to step into something new. We may fear that we are unprepared or unworthy. Yet, throughout history, God has called ordinary people into extraordinary roles. He has taken shepherds and made them kings, fishermen and made them disciples, exiles and made them leaders. He does not choose the qualified, he qualifies the chosen. When a door opens that we never expected, it is not by accident. It is an invitation to trust that he sees something in us that we do not yet see in ourselves. Sometimes we resist these unexpected shifts because they do not align with our plans. We assume that if we have not prepared for something, we must not be ready for it. But readiness is not always about having everything figured out. Sometimes it is simply about having the faith to step forward. God does not reveal the entire journey at once. He reveals just enough for us to take the next step. And as we do, we find that the opportunities he provides come with the grace needed to embrace them. There is also the temptation to dismiss these moments, to assume that they are distractions rather than divine redirections. We tell ourselves that if something was not part of our original vision, it must not be meant for us. But God's vision is greater than ours. He sees beyond our limitations and into the fullness of what we were created to be. What may seem like an interruption is often an invitation, an opportunity not just to achieve, but to become more than we thought possible. These unexpected opportunities do not always come in grand, unmistakable ways. Sometimes they arrive subtly, like a quiet whisper rather than a loud announcement. A casual conversation that sparks a new idea, a small step outside of our comfort zone that leads to an unexpected breakthrough, a challenge that forces us to develop strengths we never knew we had. The key is to remain open, to not dismiss the small beginnings, for they often hold the seeds of something far greater. It is also important to remember that not every open door is meant to be walked through. Discernment is required. But there is a difference between thoughtful hesitation and fear-based resistance. If we find ourselves turning away from an opportunity solely because it feels unfamiliar or daunting, we must ask ourselves, are we declining because it is truly not meant for us, or because we are afraid to leave the safety of what we know? God's plans often stretch us, calling us to places where our dependence on him deepens. When God is shifting our path, the opportunities that arise will not only be unexpected, but will also come with a sense of purpose. They will challenge us, but they will also align with something deeper in our spirit, a calling, a longing, a truth that has been waiting to be awakened. They may not always look how we imagined, but they will feel like an answer to something we had not yet learned to articulate. And when we step into them with trust, we find that they are not detours, but part of the very path we were always meant to walk. So when an opportunity appears that you never expected, do not be quick to dismiss it. Instead, lean in. Pray for wisdom, seek guidance, but do not let fear be the reason you turn away. The greatest chapters of our lives are often written not in the plans we make, but in the unexpected moments that change everything. And when God is the one opening the door, you can walk through it with confidence, knowing that he has already gone before you. There comes a time when the people around us no longer feel the same. The conversations that once brought joy now seem forced. The connections that once felt unshakable start to show cracks. Perhaps the friendships that once provided comfort now seem distant, or relationships that once felt secure begin to feel fragile. It is unsettling when this happens, when the very relationships we have built over time begin to shift before our eyes. But such change is not always a sign of loss. Sometimes it is a sign that God is moving us forward. God created us for relationships, but not all relationships are meant to last forever. Some are there for a season, serving a purpose in our growth and development. Others are meant to walk with us for a lifetime. But when God is shifting our path, He often rearranges the people in our lives. He removes certain influences, not as punishment, but as preparation. He brings distance where there was once closeness, not to harm us, but to help us step into the next chapter of our journey. We often resist this change. We fight to hold on, to keep things as they were. We question why a friendship is fading or why someone we trusted is suddenly distant. But what if these shifts are not something to mourn, but something to trust? What if, instead of fighting the change, we leaned into it and asked, God, what are you teaching me through this? The truth is, relationships shape us, for better or worse. Some strengthen our faith and push us closer to God, while others keep us tied to past versions of ourselves that we have outgrown. When God is preparing us for something greater, He refines our circle, removing what no longer serves His purpose for our lives. It can feel painful when familiar relationships begin to change. The natural reaction is to assume something is wrong, to think we have done something to cause the distance. But sometimes the shift has nothing to do with us personally and everything to do with God's plan. People who were once essential to our journey may have played their role and now must step aside for new relationships to take root. This is not a failure, it is a transition. And transitions, though difficult, are necessary for growth. But just as some relationships fade, others begin to form. New people enter our lives, bringing fresh perspectives, encouragement, and wisdom. These are the relationships that align with where God is leading us. They challenge us to grow, to deepen our faith, and to step fully into the person we are meant to become. The people God brings into our lives in times of transition are not coincidences. They are divine connections, sent to walk alongside us in the next season. When relationships begin to shift, the temptation is to hold on tighter. But trust requires surrender. It requires faith that God knows what He is doing, even when we do not understand. Instead of grieving what is changing, we must open our hearts to what is ahead. If God is removing certain relationships, He is making space for something better. If He is changing the people around us, He is also changing us. Growth requires letting go, not in bitterness, but in trust. Not every change in relationships is a loss. Some are redirections. Some are realignments. Some are necessary for us to step into the future God has prepared. When we see relationships shifting, rather than questioning His plan, we must trust that He is placing exactly who we need in our lives at exactly the right time. And when we surrender to His movement, we will find that what we once feared losing was never meant to stay. And what we gain in return is far greater than we ever imagined. There are moments in life when the path before us suddenly becomes steeper, the burdens heavier, and the trials unrelenting. Just when we think we have found our rhythm, a storm arises, shaking the very foundation on which we stand. It is in these moments of hardship that many begin to wonder, why now? Why this? Why me? But what if these trials are not signs of abandonment, but evidence that God is shifting our path? Growth is never easy. It often comes through seasons of difficulty, through moments when our faith is tested, and through situations that push us beyond what we thought we could endure. When God is preparing to move us into something greater, He refines us through trials. He allows challenges not to harm us, but to shape us, to strengthen the very character we will need for the next stage of our journey. The trials we face are not random, they are intentional. They are not without purpose. They are designed to prepare us for what is ahead. Consider the times in life when everything seemed to be falling apart, only to later realize that those very moments were laying the foundation for something greater. The loss that seemed unbearable, the setback that felt unfair, the hardship that drained all strength. Each one served a purpose. It is often through these trials that God reveals his plan. The doors that close, the friendships that shift, the disappointments that come, all of them are part of a divine redirection. What seems like chaos is often careful orchestration, positioning us for something we cannot yet see. The world teaches us to measure success by ease and comfort, but faith is built in the fire. A life without trials would be a life without growth. When God is shifting our path, he does not remove all obstacles. He allows them to refine us. He stretches our faith, testing whether we trust him in the storm as much as we do in the calm. Every challenge is an invitation to rely on him more fully, to surrender our own understanding, and to walk by faith rather than sight. It is in trials that we discover who we truly are. Comfort rarely demands faith, but adversity reveals it. The struggles we face are not punishments, they are lessons. God does not allow difficulty without purpose. He does not waste our pain. If we find ourselves facing an increase in trials, it may not be because we are going the wrong way, but because we are being prepared for the right one. The difficulties are not a detour. They are the road itself, leading us to where we are meant to be. Many of the greatest stories of faith are built on trials. Those who made the most profound impact did not do so without enduring hardship. Their strength was not found in avoiding difficulties, but in walking through them with unwavering trust. When the challenges increase, it is often because the calling is greater. When the trials seem unbearable, it is often because the breakthrough is near. God does not shift our path without first preparing us for what is ahead, and sometimes that preparation looks like adversity. If we find ourselves in a season where everything seems to be going wrong, where obstacles appear at every turn, and where the weight of challenges grows heavier, we must not lose heart. We must remember that God is not punishing us, he is equipping us. The trials are not meant to break us, but to build us. What we endure today is shaping who we will become tomorrow. What feels like resistance is often refinement. And when we trust in his plan, even in the midst of hardship, we will one day look back and see that every trial was a step towards something greater than we ever imagined.